Single father buys abandoned train to live in, but what he finds between the cars. Richard Johnson held his daughter's hand tightly as they walked through the rural property he had just bought for a bargain price. At 52, the retired railroad worker had lost everything in a contentious divorce and now saw that abandoned train as his only chance to start over. It was when they spotted the train covered in vegetation that Richard felt a shiver. This wasn't just a desperate purchase, it was the place where he and 15-year-old Emily would have to build a new life. "Dad, are you sure we can live here?" asked Emily, looking at the cars taken over by weeds and rust. "I have to be sure, honey. It's all we have left," replied Richard, trying to hide his own uncertainty in his voice. The girl squeezed her father's hand tighter. Since her mother had kept the house in the town of Lancaster, in rural Pennsylvania, they had been sleeping at their paternal grandmother's house. The situation was becoming unbearable, especially after his ex-sister-in-law started making nasty comments about their presence. Richard had worked 30 years as an engineer and line supervisor for the old Northeastern Railway. He knew trains like no one else, but he never imagined he would one day need to live inside one. When he saw the ad for that land with the abandoned cars being sold for a fraction of the market value, he knew it was his only option. "Let's explore together, Emily. I want to see which car can be our bedroom and which can be our living room," he said, forcing a smile. The train consisted of 6 passenger cars and a locomotive. The weeds had grown so much that some windows were completely covered by vines and creepers. The smell of mold and dampness invaded their nostrils as they approached. Emily let go of her father's hand and ran to the first car. Even with all the vegetation, it was still possible to see that it had been an elegant passenger train decades ago. The seats were covered with dry leaves and small branches. "Dad, look! There are still some intact seats here," she shouted, trying to sound excited. Richard entered the car and felt the floor creak under his feet. There would be a lot of work ahead to make it habitable, but at least it was theirs. No one could take it away from them. As they walked from car to car, Richard mentally calculated what he would need to do. General cleaning, structural inspection, basic electrical installation, plumbing for water. His railroad knowledge would help, but it would still be a huge task. "Dad, this one is less damaged," said Emily, entering the 4th car. It was true. For some reason, that car had been better preserved than the others. The windows still had intact glass, and the floor seemed sturdier. It would be a good start. Richard watched his daughter trying to stay optimistic and felt his heart tighten. Emily had always been a strong girl, but he knew the whole separation process had affected her deeply. The teenager had chosen to stay with him, even knowing the financial difficulties they would face. "You know, honey, when I worked on the railroad, I always dreamed of having my own train. Now we have one," he said, trying to make the situation less dramatic. "That's true, Dad. It's going to be our home on rails," replied Emily, smiling for the first time that day. They continued exploring until they reached the last car. This one was in worse condition than the others. The roof had some leaks, and the floor seemed less secure. Richard was checking the structure when he noticed something strange. "Emily, come see this." The girl approached and saw her father pointing to a loose floorboard. When Richard moved it, they discovered there was a hollow space underneath. "What do you think is in there, Dad?" Richard reached into the gap and felt something that seemed like leather. Carefully, he pulled out the object. It was an old suitcase covered in dust and cobwebs. "Someone hid this here a long time ago," said Richard, wiping the surface of the suitcase. Emily was curious but also a bit apprehensive. Who could have left it there, and why hidden? Richard opened the suitcase carefully. Inside were dozens of letters yellowed with time, some old photographs, and what appeared to be a small diary. "Dad, these are love letters," said Emily, picking up one of the correspondences. The letters were tied with a faded red ribbon. Richard took one of them and began to read quietly. "My dear John, I can't wait to meet again on this train. Our hiding place has been the only spot where I can truly be happy. Teacher Catherine." Emily picked up a photograph. It was a portrait of a young woman with dark hair and a sweet smile, clearly from past decades. "Look at the date on this letter, Dad, 1985. It's been almost 40 years. Richard continued sifting through the suitcase's contents. There were more letters, all signed by Catherine and addressed to a certain John. Some photographs showed the very train they were on now, but new and operational. It seems this train was used for secret meetings, daughter. Emily was fascinated by the discovery. It was like finding a treasure, a window into the past of this place that would now be their home. Dad, can we try to find out who these people were? Catherine and John? Richard hesitated. They had practical problems to solve, like making the place livable. But seeing the sparkle in his daughter's eyes, he realized that this discovery might be exactly what Emily needed to better accept the new situation. Of course we can, daughter. But first, we need to clean our new home. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the following days, Richard and Emily dedicated themselves to cleaning the train cars. During the day, Richard worked on clearing the weeds and checking the structure, while Emily cleaned the interior and organized her findings about Catherine and John. The girl had sorted the letters by date and started piecing together a timeline of the love story they had uncovered. From the correspondence, it was clear that Catherine was an elementary school teacher and John worked as an engineer. They would meet secretly on that train on weekends. Dad, this letter here talks about Catherine's father not accepting the relationship, said Emily, showing a correspondence to Richard. Richard stopped cleaning and read the letter. Catherine wrote about family pressures to end the relationship with John. Her father considered an engineer unsuitable for his teacher daughter. It was a different time, Emily. Families had a lot of control over their children's relationships. How sad, Dad. They loved each other so much and couldn't be together. Richard continued reading the letters and noticed that the relationship between Catherine and John had evolved. The last correspondences spoke of escape plans and a new life together. Look at this one, daughter. Catherine writes that she has important news to tell John. Emily read the letter over her father's shoulder. Catherine mentioned being nervous and needing to talk urgently with John about something that would change both of their lives forever. Do you think she was expecting a baby, Dad? Could be. The letters stopped suddenly after that. The discovery made Emily even more curious. What could have happened to Catherine and John? Why did the letters stop so abruptly? While cleaning the second train car, Emily made another important discovery. Behind a loose wooden panel, she found a small diary, also yellowed with time. Dad, I found Catherine's diary. Richard came down from the roof where he was checking for leaks and went to see his daughter's discovery. The diary had only a few written pages, but it confirmed their suspicions. Emily read the last entry aloud. I'm pregnant with John's child. I don't know how to tell my father. We've decided to run away next month. We'll live on this train until we find a place for our family. Dad, they were really going to run away together. Richard felt a tightness in his chest. Catherine's situation reminded him of his own experience with Emily. The difference was that in his case, he had fought for custody of his daughter and managed to keep her. What do you think happened, Dad? Why didn't they run away? We don't know yet, honey, but we'll find out. That afternoon, while they were resting from cleaning, an elderly woman approached the property. She walked slowly, leaning on a cane, and watched the train with curiosity. Good afternoon, she said when Richard came out to greet her. Good afternoon, ma'am. How can I help you? I'm Mrs. Margaret. I live on the property next door. I came to see who had bought this place. It's been decades since anyone touched this train. Emily came out of the train car and approached the two. The woman observed the girl carefully and smiled. Are you father and daughter? Yes, we are. I'm Richard Johnson, and this is my daughter Emily. We're going to live here. Mrs. Margaret looked at the train again with a strange expression, as if she were seeing ghosts from the past. This train has many stories, she said, almost whispering. Emily immediately became interested. Could Mrs. Margaret know something about Catherine and John? Do you know the story of this train? Asked Emily, unable to hide her eagerness. Mrs. Margaret hesitated. She stayed silent for a few seconds, as if deciding what to say. I worked on this train when I was young. I was a conductor for a few years in the 1980s. Richard and Emily exchanged glances. The time period matched the letters they had found. Did you ever meet a teacher named Catherine? insisted Emily. Mrs. Margaret's face completely changed. She became visibly nervous and started to back away. "I need to go, I have work at home," she said, walking away quickly. Richard and Emily were intrigued by their neighbour's reaction. It was obvious she knew something, but didn't want to talk. "Dad, she knows Catherine, I'm sure." "I thought it was strange too, honey. Let's give her some time. Maybe later she'll feel more comfortable talking." That night, Richard and Emily slept in the train car they had chosen as their main bedroom. Richard had managed to install a basic electrical connection, and they could use a small heater. It wasn't comfortable, but it was their home. "Dad, I've been thinking about Catherine all night," said Emily, lying on her makeshift mattress. "Me too, honey. Tomorrow we'll keep looking for clues." The next day, Emily made a discovery that changed everything. While organizing the letters more carefully, she found an envelope that had gone unnoticed. Inside it was a yellowed birth certificate. "Dad, come see this!" Richard ran to Emily and saw the document in her hands. It was the birth certificate of a child born in March 1986. The mother's name was listed as Catherine Smith Johnson. The father's name was blank. Dad, she really had the baby, and her last name, Johnson. Richard took the document and examined it carefully. The coincidence of the last name intrigued him, but Johnson was a very common name. It could just be a coincidence. "Let's keep this safe, Emily. It's important evidence of their story." That same day, Richard decided he needed to talk to his mother. Mrs. Dorothy, 83 years old, had worked in the area for decades and knew many people. Maybe she knew something about Catherine and John. Mrs. Dorothy's house was in town, about 20 kilometers from the train. Richard and Emily took the bus to visit her. "Mum, do you remember any train engineer named John who worked on the railway in the 1980s? Richard asked as soon as they arrived. Mrs. Dorothy was making coffee and almost dropped the cup when she heard the question. "Why do you want to know, son?" "We found some old letters on the train where we're living. We're trying to uncover the story." Richard's mother fell silent for a long time. Emily noticed she was nervous, just like Mrs. Margaret had been. "Mum, did you know this John?" Mrs. Dorothy took a deep breath and sat at the kitchen table. "John Johnson was your uncle, Richard, your father's brother." Richard felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Emily's eyes widened. "My uncle? But I never knew I had an uncle named John." "Your family hid many things from you, son. John disappeared from town over 40 years ago. No one has spoken of him since." Emily was in shock. That love story she had discovered involved her own father's uncle. "What happened to him, Grandma?" Mrs. Dorothy looked at her granddaughter with affection, but also with sadness. "John got involved with a teacher from town. Her father didn't accept the relationship. There was a serious argument, and John had to leave town in a hurry." Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing. Throughout his life, he had never known he had an uncle. Why had his family hidden this from him? "Why did no one ever tell me, Mum?" "Your father asked us never to talk about John. He said it was for the best." Emily took the birth certificate she had brought and showed it to her grandmother. "Grandma, Catherine had a baby. Look at the document here." Mrs. Dorothy examined the certificate, and her hands began to tremble. My God! John had a son, and never knew. "Why did he never know, Grandma?" asked Emily. "Catherine's family forced her to marry another man as soon as they found out about the pregnancy. John was forced to leave town before he knew he was going to be a father." Richard felt a mix of anger and sadness. His own family had taken part in an injustice that separated a couple and deprived a child of his biological father. "Where is my uncle now, Mom?" "I don't know, son. It's been over 20 years since we've had any news of him." Emily was beginning to understand the scale of the story they had uncovered. It wasn't just a romance from the past, but a family tragedy that had been hidden for decades. "Dad, we need to find Catherine's child. She must be 40 years old now." Richard agreed. But how would they find someone after so long? What if that person didn't even know they had been adopted? Back on the train, Richard and Emily spent the night talking about everything they had discovered. The story of Catherine and John had taken on an unexpected personal dimension. Dad, do you think Uncle John is still alive? I don't know, daughter, but we'll try to find out. He has the right to know he had a son. The next day, Emily had an idea. She would use social media to try to find descendants of Catherine Smith Johnson. It was a long shot, but worth trying. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Emily created a temporary profile on Facebook and started searching for people with the name Catherine Smith Johnson or variations. After several hours of searching, she found a profile that caught her attention. Dad, come look at this. On the screen was the profile of a woman named Jennifer Smith Williams. In the profile description, she mentioned that her mother was named Catherine Smith Johnson and had been a teacher. It could be her, Dad. Catherine's daughter. Richard looked at the screen and saw that Jennifer lived in New York City, in the capital. She was 40 years old, exactly the age Helena's daughter should have been. How should we get in touch, daughter? I'll send a private message explaining what we found. Emily wrote a careful message explaining about the letters and documents found on the train. She mentioned they had information about Catherine Smith Johnson that might interest the family. The reply came the same day. Jennifer confirmed that her mother had been a teacher and was very interested in what Emily had written. She scheduled a video call for the next day. Dad, I'm nervous. What if she doesn't know she was adopted? Let's take it easy, Emily. First, let's hear what she knows. At the scheduled time, Richard and Emily connected with Jennifer. She was a beautiful woman with delicate features that resembled the photographs of Catherine they had found. Hello, I'm Jennifer. You found my mother's things? Emily explained the whole story, from the discovery of the letters to the birth certificate. Jennifer listened attentively with an expression of growing surprise. My mother never mentioned a train engineer boyfriend, said Jennifer when Emily finished. Is your mother still alive? Asked Richard. She is. She's 78 years old and lives here with me in New York City, but she's always been very private about the past. Emily showed the birth certificate through the camera. Jennifer was silent for a long time. This birth certificate is mine, she said finally, her voice choked. So you know that I was adopted? Yes, I know. My father, the man who raised me, was always very open about it. He married my mother when I was 6 months old. Richard and Emily exchanged glances. Jennifer knew about the adoption, which made things easier. But my mother never wanted to talk about my biological father. She always changed the subject when I asked. Emily told her about the discovery that John was Richard's uncle, which meant Jennifer would be his cousin. Are you saying we're related? Asked Jennifer, incredulous. It seems so. My Uncle John disappeared from town right after your mother got pregnant. Jennifer was moved. She had spent 40 years wondering about her origins and was now discovering she had family she never imagined existed. Would you like to come here to New York City? I want to show these letters to my mother. Maybe it's time for her to tell the truth. Richard hesitated. The trip to New York City would cost money they barely had, but Emily was eager to meet Jennifer in person. Could we meet halfway? Suggested Richard. Even better, we can come to you. I'm curious to see this train where my mother used to meet my father. Jennifer arranged to travel with her mother the following weekend. Catherine would finally return to the place where she lived her great love. In the days leading up to the visit, Richard and Emily worked intensely on cleaning the train. They wanted the place to be presentable to welcome Catherine and Jennifer. While cleaning the main car, Richard made a discovery that left them even more intrigued. Removing a wooden wall that seemed false, he found a small secret compartment. Emily, come see this. Inside the compartment were carefully stored baby clothes, a small wooden cradle, and some old toys. Dad, they had prepared a room for the baby. Richard examined the cradle. It was a handcrafted piece, clearly made with great affection. There was even a small wooden plaque with the name Baby Johnson engraved. John must have made this cradle for the son he never knew. Emily was moved. With each discovery, the story of Catherine and John became more real and more touching. On the day of the visit, Richard and Emily waited nervously. Shortly after 2 in the afternoon, a car stopped near the train. 2 women stepped down, a young woman who was clearly Jennifer, and an elderly lady who must have been Catherine. Emily ran to greet them. Catherine walked slowly, leaning on her daughter's arm, but her eyes were fixed on the train ahead. "Catherine, welcome back," said Richard respectfully. The elderly lady did not answer immediately. She was looking at the train as if seeing a ghost. Her hands trembled, and tears began to stream down her face. "Mother, are you all right?" asked Jennifer, concerned. Catherine approached the first car and touched its side with her hand. It was as if she were reuniting with an old friend. "So long," she whispered. Emily picked up the suitcase with the letters and documents they had found. She wanted to show everything to Catherine, but she noticed the lady was emotionally shaken. "Catherine, we found your letters. All of them," said Emily softly. Catherine looked at Emily and smiled through the tears. It was a sweet smile, reminiscent of the photographs from her youth. "You read my letters?" "We did. And we discovered that John was my father's uncle. We are family." Catherine grasped Emily's hand tightly. "John, do you know what happened to my John?" Richard approached and explained that they were looking for their uncle, but he had disappeared decades ago. "He didn't disappear," Catherine said suddenly. "He was forced to leave." Jennifer helped her mother sit on one of the benches Richard had cleaned. It was time for Catherine to tell her version of the story. "My family found out I was pregnant and locked me in the house. They wouldn't let me see John anymore. When he came looking for me, my father threatened him." "What kind of threat?" asked Richard. "He said that if John didn't leave town, he would make him lose his job at the railway and never get work in the region again." Emily listened with a heavy heart. The story was even sadder than they had imagined. "And then, Mother, what happened?" asked Jennifer. "John came to this train one last time. He said he was leaving but would return when he could give me a better life. He promised to come back." Catherine stopped speaking and cried silently. Richard and Emily waited respectfully. "Did he come back, Mother?" asked Jennifer gently. "Once, 5 years later, but I was already married and had 3 small children. I couldn't anymore." Catherine couldn't finish the sentence. Richard understood that she had married another man to give the child a name and ended up building a family with him. "Where is John now?" asked Emily. "I don't know. After that last meeting, I never saw him again. He said he was going to try his luck in another country." Jennifer was learning details of her own origins that her mother had kept hidden for decades. It was a mix of joy and sadness to discover the truth. "Mother, why did you never tell me this?" "Because it hurt too much to remember, and because I didn't want to hurt your father. I mean, Anthony. He was always a good man. He took me in when I needed it." Richard felt he had to do something. His uncle had missed the chance to know his daughter, and now, 40 years later, there might still be time to correct at least part of the injustice. "Catherine, let's look for my uncle. If he's still alive, he deserves to know he has a daughter and a granddaughter." Catherine looked at Richard with hope and fear at the same time. "You would do that?" "Of course, it's family, and there's been too much injustice for too long." That afternoon, Catherine wanted to see all the train cars. It was a journey back in time for her, recalling the happy moments she had lived there with John. When they reached the car where Richard and Emily had found the baby's secret room, Catherine had an emotional collapse. "He really made a room for our baby," she sobbed, touching the handmade cradle. "Mother, did you know this room existed?" asked Jennifer. "John had told me he was preparing a surprise. I never imagined it would be this." Emily watched Catherine cry over the cradle that could have been Jennifer's and felt a special connection with that lady. After her parents' divorce, Emily had lost contact with her maternal grandmother. Catherine was filling a void in her life. "Catherine, would you like to stay for dinner with us?" asked Emily. "I would love to, dear." That night, Richard prepared a simple dinner on the train. He had installed a gas stove in one of the cars and managed to create a basic kitchen. It wasn't luxurious, but it was cozy. During dinner, Catherine shared more details about her relationship with John. They met when she took the train to teach at a rural school. John was the engineer on the line and always greeted her kindly. "He was shy but had a smile that brightened my day," Catherine recounted. "How did the romance start?" asked Emily. "One day my bicycle broke down and I missed the return train. John offered to take me back on the special train that did maintenance on the line. It was our first time alone together. Jennifer listened fascinated to the story of how her parents met and fell in love. We used to meet here on Sundays. John had a key to the train and came to do small repairs. I told my family I was visiting a friend. How long did the romance last? Asked Richard. Almost 2 years. They were the 2 happiest years of my life. Catherine told them they dreamed of getting married and traveling across the United States in their own train. John wanted to convert some cars into a mobile home and live a life of adventures with her. "Why didn't you run away when you got pregnant?" asked Emily. "We tried. We had planned to run away the week after we found out about the pregnancy. But my sister followed me and discovered our meetings," she told my father. Catherine explained that her father was a very strict and controlling person. He not only forbade the relationship, but also threatened John with serious consequences if he didn't leave town. My father was respected in the region. John knew he could carry out the threats. "What kind of man was my biological father?" asked Jennifer. Catherine smiled for the first time that day while talking about John. He was kind, hard-working, a dreamer. He loved mechanics and could fix anything. He spent hours here on the train, taking care of every detail. "Did he know you were pregnant when he left?" "No. I was going to tell him on Sunday, but that was exactly when my family found out everything. I never had a chance to talk to him." Richard was determined to find his uncle. 40 years was a long time, but maybe there was still a chance to reunite that family. "Catherine, do you remember John's full name? You remember date of birth? Any information that could help me find him?" "John Johnson Smith, born on March 15, 1960. He would be older than you, Richard." Richard did the math. His uncle would be 65 now, advanced age, but there was still hope he might be alive. When the night ended, Jennifer and Catherine returned to New York City, but with the promise to keep in touch daily. Richard committed to using all possible resources to find John. In the following days, Richard began a systematic search for his uncle. He looked through the records of the old railway, tried to contact former co-workers, and even went to the city's records office for clues. During the search, Richard made an important discovery. In the railway archives, he found John Johnson Smith's dismissal address. The document indicated that he had requested a transfer to a railway in the state of Pennsylvania. "Emily, I found a clue. Uncle John went to work in Pennsylvania when he left here." "That's great, Dad. Should we look there?" Richard called the Pennsylvania Railway, but the information was from decades ago. After several attempts, he managed to speak with a retired employee who remembered John. "John Johnson Smith. Of course I remember him. He worked here for about 10 years. He was a great train engineer. Do you know what happened to him?" "He left the United States, son. Went to try his luck in Canada, if I'm not mistaken. That must have been in the 1990s. Richard felt his heart race. His uncle had gone to Canada. Would it be possible to find him after so long in another country? "Do you have any information on how he ended up there?" "He married a Canadian woman he met here in the United States. She worked at an import company. They moved to Toronto when she returned there. Richard wrote down all the information. John had gotten married and gone to live in Canada. Maybe he had other children there." "How are we going to find him in Canada, Dad?" asked Emily. "We'll try social media again, and maybe I can contact someone at the Canadian consulate for guidance." That night, Richard called Catherine and told her what he had found out. She was moved to learn that John had rebuilt his life. "I'm glad he was happy," said Catherine, "but wouldn't you be upset if he has other children?" "Of course not, Richard. 40 years is a long time. He had the right to start over." Catherine's generosity impressed Richard. Even after so much suffering, she wished well for the man she had loved. Emily was browsing the internet looking for John Johnson Smith in Canada when she had a brilliant idea. "Dad, what if we search for the Canadian wife's name? The railway employee said she worked in imports." "That's a good idea, daughter, but we don't know her name." "Let's call the railway employee again. Maybe he remembers more details." The next day, Richard managed to speak again with the former employee of the Pennsylvania Railway. The man made an effort to recall more details about John and his wife. "Now that you mention it, I remember her name. It was Dorothy. Dorothy. Something with R. Reynolds. Dorothy Reynolds. Richard thanked him profusely and immediately passed the information to Emily. They began searching for Dorothy Reynolds in Canada. After a few hours of searching, they found a LinkedIn profile of a Dorothy Reynolds who worked in imports in Toronto. The photo showed a woman around 60 years old. It could be her, Dad, the age matches. Richard was nervous about making contact. How to explain the whole situation in English? Emily suggested using an online translator to write a careful message. The message explained that they were looking for John Johnson Smith, who had worked on the US railways and possibly moved to Canada in the 1990s. Richard mentioned being John's nephew. The reply came the next day, and it was Richard who trembled as he read it. Hello, Richard. Yes, I am married to John Johnson Smith. He is currently in a nursing home here in Toronto due to health issues. I would very much like to talk with you. Richard could hardly believe it. His uncle was alive, but apparently with health problems. Emily, we found Uncle John. He's alive! Emily shouted with joy and immediately called Jennifer to share the news. Within minutes, Catherine was also on the line, crying with emotion. Dorothy sent her phone number, and Richard called her that same day. The conversation was in Portuguese, since Dorothy had learned the language during her years in the United States. Richard, what a joy to speak with John's family. He always talked a lot about his siblings and family in the United States. How is his health? He had a stroke 2 years ago. He's lucid but has movement difficulties, lives in a specialized care home. Richard felt his heart tighten. Your uncle was unwell, which made the reunion even more urgent. Dorothy, can he have visitors? Or at least do video calls? Of course, he would be very happy. In fact, he always wondered what happened to the family from the United States. Richard scheduled a video call for the next day. Catherine, Jennifer, and Emily would all be present for the historic moment. That night, Richard could barely sleep. The next day, he would meet the uncle he had never known and who had been erased from the family memory for decades. In the afternoon, everyone gathered on the train for the video call. Catherine was visibly nervous but determined. It would be the first contact with John in over 40 years. When the call connected, the first person to appear on the screen was Dorothy. She was an elegant lady with grey hair and a welcoming smile. Hello, family. John is here with me. He was very emotional when he heard about the call. Dorothy adjusted the camera, and John appeared on the screen. He was an elderly man with completely white hair, sitting in a wheelchair but with bright, attentive eyes. John, whispered Catherine, bringing her hands to her face. Catherine, is it really you? Asked John, his voice choked. Catherine couldn't answer. She was crying profusely while looking at the face of the man she had loved in her youth. John, I'm Richard, your nephew, son of your brother Michael. John looked at Richard with curiosity. Richard, you were a baby when I left the United States. Look how you've grown. Emily approached the camera. Uncle John, I'm Emily, Richard's daughter, and I have a special person for you to meet. Emily signaled for Jennifer to come closer. John, this is Jennifer, your daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. John looked at Jennifer on the screen as if he were seeing an apparition. My daughter. It's true, John, said Catherine, finding the courage to speak. Jennifer is our daughter. She was born after you left. John began to cry. His hands trembled and Dorothy had to hold them. I have a daughter. With you, Catherine? Yes, dear. And she's beautiful, isn't she? Jennifer was too emotional to speak. After 40 years, she was finally meeting her biological father. Dad. Can I call you Dad? She managed to say finally. Of course you can, my daughter. What a beautiful voice you have. It's just like your mother's when she was young. The conversation continued for over 2 hours. John wanted to know everything about Jennifer, her profession, family, life. He also talked about his life in Canada, his marriage to Dorothy, and the 2 children they had together. Richard, I always wanted to return to the United States to reunite with the family. But first it was a busy life, then age, and now this health. Uncle, we can come visit you in Canada. You would do that? Of course, we're family. and I want you to know our story too. We're living in the same train where you used to meet with Catherine." John was moved to learn that the train had been preserved and that Richard and Emily were living there. "That train! How long has it been since I thought about it? It was our special little corner, wasn't it, Catherine?" "Yes, it was, and it's still beautiful. Richard and Emily are taking very good care of it." During the conversation, John mentioned something that surprised everyone. "Richard, I left some things hidden on that train. Money I was saving for the escape with Catherine. Did you ever find it?" Richard and Emily exchanged glances. They had explored the train thoroughly, but perhaps there were more things hidden. "Where exactly, Uncle?" "In the last car, under the floor on the right side, there's a loose board that hides a compartment." "Uncle, we found a suitcase in that spot. Catherine's suitcase with the letters, but there's another hiding spot on the right side. There's a metal box there." After the video call, Richard and Emily ran to the last car. John had been very specific about the location. "There, Dad. That plank looks different from the others." Richard removed the plank and found another compartment. Inside was a rusty metal box, but still sealed. "Let's open it, Emily." Inside the box was old money, some simple jewelry, and a sealed letter. Emily opened the letter and read it aloud. "Catherine, if you're reading this, it means you managed to return to our special place. This money was for our honeymoon. If we ever have a child and I'm not here to raise them, use this money to give them a better life. With all my love, John." Catherine was listening via video call and couldn't stop crying. He thought of everything, even an inheritance for the child he never met. Richard examined the money and jewelry. Even though they were old, they still had some value, especially the jewelry. "Catherine, this is rightfully yours. John left it for you and Jennifer." "No, Richard. You're taking care of the place where this inheritance was kept. You deserve to keep it," Richard insisted, but Catherine and Jennifer were unyielding. They wanted Richard to use the resources to better restore the train. In the following days, the story of the family reunion spread through the local community. Mrs. Margaret, the neighbor who had seemed nervous, decided to approach Richard. "Richard, I need to talk to you about that time," she said, visibly emotional. "Of course, Mrs. Margaret, please come in." The elderly lady entered the train and looked around nostalgically. "I helped Catherine and John meet here." Richard and Emily listened attentively. "How so, you helped?" "I was a conductor on this train. I knew the schedules, knew when there would be no inspection. I arranged the meetings so they could be together without being discovered." "Why were you nervous when we asked about them?" Mrs. Margaret sighed deeply. "Because I felt guilty for decades. When Catherine's family found out about the relationship, they pressured me to tell where they were meeting." "Did you tell?" "I did, and I regretted it for the rest of my life. If I hadn't spoken, maybe they would have managed to run away." Emily held Mrs. Margaret's hand. "You had no choice. They must have threatened you too." "They did threaten me. They said I would lose my job, and no one in the area would give me work." Richard understood that Mrs. Margaret had carried that guilt for 40 years. "Mrs. Margaret, would you like to speak with Catherine and John? They will understand your situation." "Would they forgive me?" "I'm sure they would." In the next video call, Mrs. Margaret spoke with Catherine and John. It was a moment of forgiveness and reconciliation that moved everyone. "Margaret, you were always a friend," said Catherine. "I never blamed you for anything." "You helped us more than you hindered us," John added. "Without you, we wouldn't even have had those happy meetings." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. With Catherine and John's forgiveness, Mrs. Margaret finally felt freed from the guilt she had carried. She offered her savings to help with the train's restoration as a way to make up for what she considered her past failure. "You don't have to, Mrs. Margaret," said Richard, "but if you want to help, you can tell us more stories from that time. We want to preserve the memory of the place." The idea of preserving the memory gave Emily an inspiration. She suggested creating a small museum in the train, telling the story of Catherine and John, but also of all the people who had important moments in those train cars. "Dad, We could turn one of the cars into a memory space. People from the area could bring photographs and tell their stories related to the train. Richard liked the idea. It would be a way to honor not only the history of their family members, but of the entire community. Catherine and Jennifer became very interested in the project and offered financial help. With the combined resources, they could restore the train more completely. During the restoration work, Richard received an unexpected visit. It was a man of about 50, well-dressed, who introduced himself as William Anthony Williams. "I am Jennifer's father," he said. "That is, the man who raised her." Richard was surprised. William Anthony was the man who had married Catherine and taken Jennifer as his daughter. "Mr. William Anthony, what an honor to meet you. Please come in. I came here because I want to thank you. Jennifer has been very happy since she discovered the truth about her origins, and Catherine is also more at peace." Richard offered coffee and they talked about the situation. "Aren't you bothered by all this?" "On the contrary, I always encouraged Catherine to tell Jennifer the truth. She was the one who never wanted to talk about the past." William Anthony revealed that he had always known all the details of Catherine and John's story. When he married her, he made sure to understand the whole situation. "I loved her knowing that she had loved another man, and I loved Jennifer as if she were my biological daughter." "You are an admirable man." "No, Richard, I did what anyone would do. Catherine needed support, and Jennifer needed a father. I needed a family. It worked out for everyone." William Anthony shared that he had followed Jennifer's search for her roots from afar and was moved when he learned of the reunion with John. "John may be the biological father, but I had the privilege of raising her. Now she has two father figures. It's all joy." William Anthony's generosity impressed Richard. There was no jealousy or resentment, only happiness for the family's joy. "Mr. William Anthony, would you like to join a video call with John? I think he would very much like to thank you." "I would love to meet him." In the next video call, John and William Anthony met virtually. It was an emotional moment between two men who had loved the same woman at different times and had Jennifer as a shared daughter. "William Anthony, I have no words to thank you for what you did for Catherine and Jennifer," said John. "John, you don't need to thank me. I am the one who thanks you for giving me the opportunity to be a father. Now Jennifer has two fathers who love her, and she deserves that. She's a wonderful daughter." During the conversation, William Anthony mentioned something that surprised everyone. "John, Catherine kept some of your things all these years, photographs, letters you sent after you left." "Catherine received letters from me?" "Yes, she did." "Yes, she." "About 3 or 4 in the first years after you left town." Catherine confirmed that she had received the letters but never replied because she was already married and didn't want to cause trouble. "John, you wrote that you would return when you were in a better position." I wanted to reply, but I understand, Catherine. You did what was best for you and Jennifer at the time. John revealed that he had written several letters in the early years, always hoping for a reply that never came. "After 5 years without a response, I understood that you had moved on. That's when I met Dorothy." Catherine asked William Anthony to bring John's old letters on his next visit. She wanted Jennifer to know all the attempts her biological father had made to stay in touch. The letters revealed that John had returned to the United States once, 5 years after leaving. He stayed in the area for a week, trying to find out what had happened to Catherine. "I learned that you had married and had other children. I didn't want to disrupt your life," explained John during a video call. "Did you ever see me?" asked Catherine. "Yes, I did, from a distance. You were in a park with 3 small children." She seemed happy. Catherine remembered that period and confirmed she truly was happy, but always with a hidden longing for John. "If you had shown up, I don't know what would have happened. That's why I didn't appear. I didn't want to destroy the family you had built." Jennifer was discovering a noble side of her biological father. Even while suffering, he had respected Catherine's new life. While family conversations continued, Richard faced a practical problem. A real estate investor had appeared interested in buying the land where the train was located. "Mr. Johnson, I offer 5 times what you paid for the land," said the businessman. "I'm not interested in selling." Think about it. With that money, you could buy a nice house in the city and still have plenty left over. Richard was tempted. The offered amount would solve all his financial problems and still allow him to buy a comfortable home for Emily. "Dad, are you thinking about selling?" asked Emily, worried. "I'm thinking about our future, daughter. This money would change our lives." Emily became distressed. The train had become much more than a home to her. It was the place where they discovered the family history, where they made new friends, and where they felt truly at home for the first time since the divorce. "Dad, this place is special. It's not just our home. It's our history." Richard knew Emily was right, but he also needed to be practical. They still faced financial difficulties, and that money would be security for the future. "Let's talk with Catherine, Jennifer, and John before deciding," suggested Emily. In the next video call, Richard told them about the investors' proposal. The family's reaction was immediate. "Richard, you can't sell that place," said Catherine. "It's our history, our emotional heritage," added Jennifer. John also spoke up. "Richard, that train is all that remains of my youth in the United States. It's the place where I lived the happiest moments of my life." Richard explained his financial concerns, and everyone understood the dilemma. "Richard, what if we help financially?" suggested Jennifer. "We can contribute monthly to the maintenance of the place." Catherine supported the idea. "I can donate an amount to improve the structure. This place deserves to be preserved." John also wanted to contribute. "I have a small retirement here in Canada. I can send a portion every month." Richard was moved by the family's generosity, but didn't want to accept financial help. "You don't need to worry about this. I'll find a solution." "Richard, we're family now. Family helps each other," insisted Catherine. Emily had an idea that could solve the problem definitively. "Dad, what if we turned part of the place into a small tourist spot with the memory museum and guided tours?" Richard considered the suggestion. It was a possibility to generate some income while maintaining the integrity of the place. "We can try, but I don't know if there would be tourist interest." "Let's find out. The story is interesting and the place is beautiful." Catherine offered to use her contacts from her teaching days to promote the project in the region's schools. Educational visits could be a good start. William Anthony suggested contacting the local press to tell the story of the family reunion. The publicity could attract curious visitors. Mrs. Margaret knew other people in the region who had stories related to the train. She could help gather more memories for the museum. Gradually, the project began to take shape. Richard decided to refuse the investors' proposal and bet on memory tourism. The first story about the history appeared in the regional newspaper and had an immediate impact. Several people got in touch, sharing their own memories related to the train. A 70-year-old gentleman called, saying he had been an engineer on that line in the 1970s. He wanted to visit the place and share his stories. An 80-year-old lady said she knew Catherine back then and wanted to reunite with her. A group of history students became interested in doing an academic project on preserving railway memory. Emily was excited about the responses. "Dad, it's going to work. People are interested in our history." Richard began to believe it really could work. The train was becoming a gathering point for memories and stories. During preparations to open the space to the public, Richard received an unexpected call from Dorothy, John's wife. "Richard, I have important news. John is getting medical clearance to travel to the United States." Richard couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Can he really come? The doctors approved it." "With medical supervision and special care, yes, it will probably be his last chance to meet his American family in person." Richard immediately shared the news with everyone. Catherine cried with emotion upon learning she would reunite with John in person after more than 40 years. "I can't believe I'm going to see him again," she said during the video call. "Catherine, do you want it to be just us meeting, or can it be with the whole family?" asked John. "I want the whole family present. Our love resulted in a beautiful family, John. I want to celebrate that with everyone." Jennifer was eager to meet her father in person. "Daddy, I can't wait to give you a real hug." Emily was organizing all the details of the visit. "Uncle John, we're going to throw an unforgettable party for you." Richard was moved, but also concerned about the logistics. John would come in a wheelchair with mobility limitations. They would need to adapt the train to accommodate him properly. "Dorothy, when can you come?" "We're planning for next month." John is excited but also nervous. Why nervous? He's afraid he won't live up to expectations. 40 years have changed him a lot. Catherine reassured John during the video call. "John, you're the man I loved. Age doesn't change that." "Catherine, I'm not the same either. My health. We've aged too, dear. What matters is we're still here, and our daughter exists and is wonderful." In the days leading up to the visit, the entire local community mobilized to help with preparations. Mrs. Margaret coordinated a cleaning and decoration effort. William Anthony offered his house in town for Dorothy and John to stay in, since the train still didn't have suitable accommodations for someone with mobility limitations. The city council president learned of the story and offered official support for the event. The family reunion had become a regional happening. Emily created a blog about the story, and it began receiving visits from people across the country interested in the love story of Catherine and John. Richard realized that this story had touched people in a special way, perhaps because, in times of disposable relationships, the story of a love that withstood 40 years of separation touched people's hearts. "Emily, our lives have completely changed since we found that suitcase," Richard commented. "It changed for the better, Dad. We found a family we didn't even know existed. And you? Are you happy living here on the train?" "I am, Dad. For the first time since Mom's divorce, I feel truly at home." Richard hugged his daughter. Despite all the financial difficulties, they had found something more valuable, an expanded family and a life purpose. Richard's ex-wife, Amanda, had followed all the developments through Emily. Initially skeptical about the decision to live on the train, she began to realize the importance of that experience for her daughter. "Richard, we need to talk," she said during a phone call. Richard grew tense. Amanda only called when there was some legal or financial problem. "What is it, Amanda?" "I want to drop the lawsuit about the train. I realized it's important for Emily." Richard was surprised. Amanda had filed a lawsuit claiming rights to any money he might get from the property. "Are you sure?" "I am. Emily told me the whole story. This place means a lot to her. I don't want to take that away from you." Richard felt a huge relief. It was one less worry to deal with. "Thank you, Amanda. That means a lot." "And Richard, I'm sorry for making the divorce so difficult. I was hurt and ended up being unfair." It was the first time in years that Amanda had acknowledged her excesses during the separation process. "It's okay, Amanda. The important thing is for Emily to be happy. Can I visit you when Emily's grandfather comes from abroad?" Richard hesitated. It would be strange to have Amanda present at the family reunion, but Emily had the right to have her mother around if she wanted. "I'll ask Emily." Emily was surprised by her mother's request, but agreed to the visit. "Dad, I think Mom is changing. She seems calmer lately." "I hope that's true, honey." 2 days before John and Dorothy's arrival, Richard received a call that would change everything again. It was from a former employee of the Canadian Railway. "Mr. Richard, Dorothy asked me to call you. John fell ill during the trip, and they're at a hospital in New York City." Richard felt his heart race. "What happened?" "He had a new complication from the stroke. He's stable, but the doctors don't recommend he continue the journey." Richard explained the situation to Emily, and they immediately headed for New York City. Catherine and Jennifer also went to the hospital. John was lucid but visibly weakened. Dorothy explained that the stress of the trip had caused a relapse. "John, how are you feeling?" asked Catherine, holding his hand. "Frustrated. I wanted so much to see that train again." "The train can wait. The important thing is for you to get well." John looked at Jennifer beside the bed. "My daughter, I'm sorry I can't go to our special place." "Daddy, the special place is wherever we're all together. It doesn't matter if it's on the train or here in the hospital." Richard had an idea. "Uncle, what if we bring the train to you?" "How so?" "We can do a long video call and give you a complete virtual tour of the train. We'll show every car, tell every story." John liked the idea. If he couldn't go to the train physically, at least he could revisit it virtually. The next day, Richard and Emily returned to the train with live streaming equipment. Catherine, Jennifer, William Anthony, and Dorothy watched from the hospital with John. "John, we're entering the first car," said Richard, moving the camera slowly. John watched every detail on the tablet screen, recalling memories from decades ago. "That's where I waited for Catherine to arrive," he commented, seeing one of the restored benches. "Catherine added to the memories, and I always arrived eager to meet you." The virtual tour lasted 3 hours. Richard showed every car, every detail of the restoration, every corner where they had found traces of the past. When they reached the baby room that John had prepared, he couldn't contain his emotion. "I dreamed so much about the day our son would play there." "And our daughter is here now, John. She grew up and became a wonderful woman," said Catherine. Jennifer approached the camera. "Daddy, you made a beautiful room. I can imagine what it would have been like growing up there." During the broadcast, several people from the community appeared at the train. Mrs. Margaret brought a homemade cake. Neighbors showed up to send hugs to John. "John, see how many people care about your story," said Richard. John was moved to see how his love story had touched so many people. "Richard, you've turned our story into an example of hope for people." After the virtual visit, the doctor said John couldn't travel anytime soon. He would have to stay in New York City for at least a week for stabilization. Richard suggested that everyone go to New York City to spend a few days together. It was an opportunity for family time that might not come again. "Uncle, let's rent apartments near the hospital and all stay together." "You would do that for me?" "Of course. Family should be together during important moments." Catherine, Jennifer, William Anthony, Richard, and Emily rented temporary apartments in New York City. Dorothy was staying at the hospital hotel. For a week, they took turns visiting John and used the time to get to know each other better. Catherine and Dorothy developed a special friendship, two women who had loved the same man at different times, but without jealousy or resentment. "Dorothy, thank you for making John happy all these years," said Catherine. "Catherine, thank you for giving birth to the wonderful daughter he always dreamed of having." Jennifer met her two Canadian half-siblings through video call. Michael, 25, and Sarah, 23, were moved to discover they had an older sister in the United States. "Jennifer, you have to come visit us in Canada," said Michael. "And we want to see the United States too," added Sarah. John was happy seeing his family expand and come together. 2 marriages, 3 children, sons-in-law, daughters-in-law, and now grandchildren, meeting and liking each other. "Richard, thank you for bringing our family together. I thought I would die without meeting Jennifer." "What matters is that everything worked out, Uncle." During his hospitalization, John had a serious conversation with Richard about the train's future. "Richard, I want to leave my share of the Canadian inheritance to you and Emily. Use it to keep the train as a memory center." "Uncle, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. That place is my legacy in the United States. I want it preserved forever." John also asked to be cremated when he died, and for his ashes to be scattered on the train. "I want to stay forever in the place where I was happiest in my life." Catherine held his hand. "John, don't talk about leaving now that we've found each other again." "Catherine, I'm at peace. I met my daughter, reunited with you, found a beautiful family in the United States. I can leave peacefully whenever God wants." Richard promised that John's wishes would be respected. The train would be preserved, and he would have his final rest in the place he loved so much. When John was discharged from the hospital, everyone returned to the train area. Even though he couldn't board the cars, John wanted to at least see them up close. Dorothy brought a special wheelchair, and John spent the entire afternoon beside the train, touching the cars and remembering the past. "It's exactly as I remembered," he said, running his hand along the rusty side. Emily pushed the wheelchair and told him about each discovery they made during the cleaning. "Uncle, we found your tools stored in a compartment. They're rusty, but we kept them as relics." "My tools? I spent hours fixing this train on weekends." Catherine walked beside the wheelchair, also reminiscing. "You always said that one day you would turn this train into a home for our family." And in the end, it really did. Richard and Emily live here now. That night, they had a family dinner in the first car of the train. John was tired but happy. "This is the most special dinner of my life," he said, looking at everyone around the makeshift table. Jennifer held one of her father's hands, and Emily held the other. Catherine was next to Dorothy, and Richard was next to William Anthony. "Dad, tell us what the United States was like when you were young," asked Emily. John spent hours telling stories about the railway, his co-workers, the trips he made as an engineer. "I knew every curve, every bridge, every station on this line. It was my life." "And now we're preserving that memory," said Emily. "You're doing beautiful work, Emily. Your father should be proud of you." Richard smiled. "I'm very proud. Emily is a special girl." When the evening ended, John was visibly emotional. "Thank you for giving me the chance to live this moment. I couldn't ask for a better ending to my story." Dorothy helped John get ready to sleep at the hotel. He was exhausted but fulfilled. "Dorothy, thank you for supporting me on this trip. I know it wasn't easy for you." "John, seeing you this happy is worth any sacrifice." "Aren't you jealous of Catherine?" "Jealous of what?" "Catherine loved you when you were young. I love you now that we're old. They're different moments in a long life." John kissed his wife's forehead. "You're a wise woman, Dorothy." The next day, John and Dorothy had to return to Canada. John wasn't physically able to stay longer without specialized medical care. The farewell was very emotional. Everyone knew it would probably be the last time they'd be together in person. "Catherine, thank you for giving me the most beautiful daughter in the world," said John, hugging her. "Thank you for giving me the purest love of my life," replied Catherine. Jennifer hugged her father for a long time. "Daddy, now I'll call you every day. I don't want to miss any more moments with you. And I want to know everything about your life, my daughter. We have 40 years of conversations to catch up on." Richard promised to keep sending reports about the progress of the train museum. "Uncle, you'll follow every step of preserving our special place." "I'm counting on that, Richard. That train is our living memory." Emily made one last request. "Uncle John, can you send us physical letters? I want to keep your handwriting as a keepsake." "Of course, Emily. I'll write letters every week." When John and Dorothy got into the car to go to the airport, everyone was crying. It had been an intense and transformative week for the whole family. "Dad, it was so good to meet Uncle John," said Emily, waving until the car disappeared. "It was, daughter. Now I understand where our love for trains and mechanics comes from." Catherine and Jennifer stayed a few more days in the area, helping Richard and Emily plan the next stages of the museum project. "Richard, I want to make a substantial donation for the complete restoration of the train," said Catherine. "Catherine, you've already done so much. This place saved John and saved you too. It deserves to be properly preserved." With Catherine's resources, plus John's promised inheritance and growing tourist interest, Richard was able to significantly expand the project. They hired an architect specialized in historical preservation to plan the restoration while maintaining the authenticity of the cars. One car would be transformed into an interactive museum, another into a souvenir shop, another into a themed snack bar, and 2 cars would keep their residential function for Richard and Emily. "Dad, it's going to be beautiful, a real museum," said Emily, looking at the plans. "And the best part, we'll be able to keep living here." The project gained support from the City Hall, which included the train in the city's official tourist route. The story of Catherine and John had become a symbol of true love that overcomes obstacles. 6 months later, the Railway Love Museum was officially inaugurated. John participated in the ceremony via video call, moved to see his youthful dream come true in a way he never imagined. "Richard, you've turned our love story into a lesson of hope for other people," said John during the live broadcast of the inauguration. "Uncle, your story deserved to be known. You are an example of true love." Catherine cut the inauguration ribbon symbolically, being applauded by the dozens of people present. 40 years ago, I thought our story had ended in tragedy. Today I see it was just the beginning of something greater. The museum began receiving visitors from various parts of the country, dating couples, engaged couples planning weddings, people who had lost great loves, all identified with the story of Catherine and John. Emily became the main guide of the museum, telling the story with passion and details that moved the visitors. "This is the suitcase where the love letters that changed our lives were found," she explained, showing the original object. Richard dedicated himself to the technical maintenance of the train cars and to researching new stories related to the train. He discovered that dozens of people in the region had emotional memories linked to that railway line. Mrs. Margaret became the official storyteller of the museum, narrating episodes from the time she worked as a conductor. William Anthony created a digital photographic archive with old images of the railway provided by local residents. Jennifer came to visit every month, always bringing news about John and the Canadian family. Daddy is very proud of the museum. He says he finally managed to turn the train into a home for the family, as he always dreamed. Catherine moved to a house near the museum to be closer to the project and to be able to receive John's Canadian children when they came to visit the United States. "I never thought that at 78 I would start life over in a new city," she said. "But I feel at home here." Richard's ex-wife Amanda surprised everyone by becoming a frequent visitor to the museum. She became interested in the story and started helping with the financial administration of the project. "Richard, you and Emily created something very beautiful here. I'm proud of you," she said during a visit. "Thank you, Amanda. It means a lot for you to say that." Emily was happy seeing her parents finally able to talk without fighting. "Dad, I think Mum is understanding why we chose to live here. Your mother was always smart, Emily. She just needed time to process the changes." 1 year after the museum's inauguration, Richard received a call that made him very sad. John had passed away in his sleep in Canada. "Richard, he left in peace," said Dorothy over the phone. The last thing he said was that he was happy to have met the American family. Richard communicated the news to everyone. Catherine cried a lot, but said she was at peace because she had reconciled with John before he left. "He died knowing he had a wonderful daughter and a family that loved him," she said. Jennifer was devastated, but consoled herself by remembering the special moments she had lived with her father in the last months of his life. "At least I had the chance to meet him and tell him I loved him." Following John's wishes, his ashes were brought from the United States and scattered around the train in an emotional ceremony. "Uncle John, now you can stay forever in the place you loved the most," said Richard, scattering the ashes. Catherine planted a red rose bush at the site in honor of the roses John used to give her during their courtship. "So there will always be flowers in the place where our love began," she said. Emily suggested creating a permanent memorial for John in the museum. "Dad, we can make a special room telling his story as an engineer and as a person." "That's a great idea, daughter. Let's include testimonials from everyone who knew him." The John Johnson Smith Memorial was inaugurated 6 months later, with the presence of Michael and Sarah, the Canadian children who came to see the United States for the first time. "It's moving to see how Daddy is remembered here," said Michael. "He always said the United States was his true home," Sarah added. The museum's story continued to grow. 2 years after John's death, the place was already receiving over 1,000 visitors per month and had become a benchmark for memory tourism in the region. Richard found professional fulfillment for the first time in decades. "Emily, I never imagined that at 50 I'd discover a new calling." "Dad, you were born to preserve stories. It's a gift." Emily, now 18, had been accepted into a university to study history and museology, but decided to postpone her course to keep working at the museum. "Dad, this project is more important than any college right now. I can study later." "Are you sure, honey? I don't want you to sacrifice your dreams." "This is my dream now, Dad. Preserving memories and moving people with real stories." Catherine, at 80 years old, wrote a book telling her story with John. The book became a small regional bestseller and brought even more visitors to the museum. "I never thought I'd become a writer one day," she said, "but our story deserved to be told in detail." The book was translated into Spanish and became successful in Canada too, where Dorothy promoted it in honor of her late husband. Jennifer opened a small themed inn near the museum, decorated with railway elements from her parents' era. "I want people to experience a bit of the romantic atmosphere of the train era," she explained. William Anthony retired and decided to move to the area as well, to be closer to the extended family. "After 40 years of caring for Catherine and Jennifer, I can't be far from them now," he said. Mrs. Margaret, at 90 years old, still works as the museum's storyteller, being one of the main attractions for visitors. "This place gave me a new reason to live," she said. "I can finally tell our stories with pride, not guilt." 5 years after finding the first suitcase, Richard reflected on everything that had changed in their lives. "Emily, remember when we arrived here with nothing but a suitcase of clothes?" "I remember, Dad. And now we have a huge family and a thriving business. The most important thing is that we found our place in the world." Emily, now a young adult of 20, had become a recognized expert in railway memory preservation. Universities invited her to give lectures about the museum project. "Dad, we received an invitation to present our work at an international museology conference. You deserve this recognition, honey. You've turned your life into a mission." Richard married again to Rebecca, the restorer he had met during the museum's construction. Rebecca brought her own children into the family, and they adapted well to the unique life in the train museum. "Richard, thank you for showing me it's possible to start over at 50, said Rebecca. "Thank you for accepting our unconventional life." Catherine, at 82, decided to take her first international trip to visit Canada and the places where John had lived. "I want to walk the land where my John was happy," she said. Dorothy welcomed her like a sister in Toronto, two widows united by the memory of the same beloved man. "Catherine, John spoke so much about you. It's as if I've known you for years." "Dorothy, thank you for making him happy. I know he was truly loved with you too." During the trip, Catherine met the Canadian grandchildren and was moved to see how John had built a beautiful family in Canada. "He managed to be happy even far from me," she said. "That gives me peace." The train museum celebrated 10 years of operation with a big party. Hundreds of people who had been touched by Catherine and John's story attended the celebration. Richard, now 62 years old, looked at everything they had built with pride and gratitude. Who would have thought that buying a train out of desperation would turn into the best decision of my life? Emily, with a degree in history, specializing in museum studies, had transformed the small local museum into a national benchmark for preserving emotional memory. "Dad, our story proves there are no accidents. Everything has a purpose." Catherine, now 85 years old and still lucid, cut the museum's birthday cake surrounded by the entire extended family. "John, wherever you are, thank you for making our story eternal," she said, looking up at the sky. Jennifer brought her teenage children to learn about their grandparents' story. It was the third generation connecting with that love story. "Grandma Catherine, is it true that Grandpa John waited for you at the train every Sunday?" asked the 15-year-old granddaughter. "It's true, my dear, and I was never late, because I knew he would be waiting for me." Mrs. Margaret, at 95 years old, still participated in the museum's activities and was considered a living treasure of the region. "My dear," she said to Emily, "you turned my guilt into pride. Now I can speak of this story with joy." Amanda, who had reconnected with the family, brought her new husband to see the museum. "This is the place where my daughter found her calling in life." Sandra's new husband was impressed with the story. "It's the most romantic thing I've ever heard. You should turn this into a movie." Richard laughed. "We've received several offers from producers, but we decided to keep our story here, accessible to everyone." During the party, Emily announced her plans for the future. "Dad, I want to expand our model to other abandoned places. I believe there are many forgotten stories waiting to be discovered. You have my blessing and all my support, daughter." Catherine approached Emily. "Dear, you gave meaning to our story. John would be proud to see what the place he loved so much has become." "Catherine, the story is yours. We just preserved it." "No, Emily, you completed it. A love story only becomes complete when it touches other lives and inspires other people." When the party ended and everyone had left, Richard and Emily stayed alone in the train, just like that first night 10 years ago. "Dad, are you happy with everything we've built?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible, daughter." "And don't you miss the life we had before?" "What life, Emily? Before we came here, we had no life. We only had problems and sorrows." Emily looked at the illuminated train cars, full of stories and memories. "That's true. Here we found our true family and our true home. Richard hugged his daughter, and most importantly, we discovered that it's worth fighting for dreams, even when it seems like everything is lost. Like Catherine and John did. Exactly. They taught us that true love is never lost. It just transforms and finds new ways to manifest. That night, Richard and Emily slept in the same train car where it had all begun, surrounded by the stories they had discovered and preserved. Dad, thank you for not giving up when everything seemed impossible. Thank you for believing that this train could become our home. Good night, Uncle John, whispered Emily, looking out the window where Catherine's rosebush was blooming. A gentle breeze swayed the rosebush's branches, as if John were waving in response. Richard smiled and closed his eyes, grateful for the entire journey that had brought them there. From the desperation of a man who had lost everything, a story of love, family, and purpose was born that would touch hundreds of hearts in the years to come. And so, the abandoned train that Richard bought out of desperation became the place where a family reunited, where memories were preserved, and where love proved stronger than time and distance. End of story. And you? What did you think of this love story that spanned decades? Can you imagine the emotion of discovering a family history kept for so long? Leave in the comments what you felt while following Richard and Emily on this journey. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one.